welcome to Take Two, the show that looks at the issues behind the news. I'm Ian Henshall. Today we have some news reports. I'll be talking to Fran Anderson on the sinister NATO black site on the island of Diego Garcia, and finally Roy Hunter on the situation in Nigeria. Nobel Peace Prize organiser to face police investigation. President Obama, champion of peace. It doesn't sound quite right, does it? When Obama was given the Nobel Peace Prize shortly after taking office, there were raised eyebrows. Even his supporters thought it was a little soon. When he escalated the war in Afghanistan and gave the go-ahead to the bombing of Libya, people thought it was just an honest mistake by the Nobel Prize Committee. But it may not be. The police have been called in by Norwegian lawyer Fredrik S. Heffermehl, an author who has specialised in the story of arms manufacturer Alfred Nobel and the peace plan he hoped to promote with the Peace Prize. Heffermehl's request for an administrative police investigation is supported by 16 prominent Scandinavians, parliamentarians, lawyers, authors and peace activists. This is what he said. In his last years, Nobel joined the peace movement and wished to support financially its idea of cooperation on disarmament to replace military force and forces. The 5-member selection committee should step down and be replaced by people who favour the idea of the prize. The Peace Prize is for the person, and this is in quotes, the person who shall have done the most or the best work for fraternity between nations, for the abolition or reduction of standing armies, and for the holding and promotion of peace congresses. The prize is not a lifetime award, but goes, along with the other Nobel Prizes, to those who, during the preceding year, shall have conferred the greatest benefit to mankind. Well, that's what the Nobel wanted. Confusingly, all the other Nobel Prizes are awarded by the Swedish rather than the Norwegian Nobel Foundation. Heffermehl obtained an order in March 2012 from the Swedish Foundation's authority clarifying the position, but he says it has not led the Norwegian panel to show any interest in Nobel and what he really wanted. And this is what he says: "This is unlawful and criminal, and the requested police investigation comes as a last resort to secure justice for the champions of peace Nobel specified in his will." The letter of accusation points in particular to Thorbjørn Jagland, the chair of the Nobel Committee and the incumbent Secretary General of the Council of Europe, and to Geir Lundestad, the powerful secretary of the committee. Heffermehl says the laws must be respected also by politicians. It is particularly worrisome that the Nobel awarders act as if they were above the law and seem to feel confident that society will not enforce the law against them. That's what Sweden's Thomas Magnusson, a former president of the International Peace Bureau, said. Ignoring dissent and mowing down dissidents is a dangerous path to embark on. If we allow such norms to become political standard, how much democracy do we then have? US vets, suicide epidemic. To be frank, we could hardly believe this at first. It looked just so shocking, but the evidence seems clear that there is indeed an epidemic of suicides by US military personnel who fought in Afghanistan and Iraq. The Department of Veterans Affairs in the US puts the figure at an astonishing 22 per day. Around 20% of all suicides in the US are veterans. Many causes are discussed in the mainstream media, but not the most obvious one. This is, of course, that some of these veterans are living with terrible crimes on their conscience. You might be able to persuade someone under active enemy threat to commit acts of extreme violence, but when they get back home, they come to feel different about it. Atrocities is a strong word, but some have been well documented, for instance the systematic torture ordered from the top down. But this may just be the tip of the iceberg. For instance, there are stories beginning to surface that Obama's drone killers are routinely and under orders striking rescue workers in a follow-up attacks. Up to now, this tactic has rightly been described as a despicable form of terrorism. Another problem for America's returning military is poverty and unemployment. A study in Minnesota showed that 27% of veterans surveyed don't have consistent access to sufficient food. The overall figure in the US general population is 14.5%, which is shocking enough. And now for our good news section. A major mainstream figure in Australia has broken ranks with the US. Malcolm Fraser, Conservative Prime Minister in the early 80s, says that with the Cold War now history, Australia should split off from the US empire. Rather than protect Australia from aggression, he fears that Washington could help attract it. He points out that the US snooping facility in Pine Gap is not just for surveillance, but could be assisting in Washington's murderous and illegal drone strikes, while special forces bases could be used for aggressive acts against neighbouring countries. Fraser's comments have been widely circulated in Australia and present an unexpected obstacle to Washington's new strategy of meddling in various local squabbles in the Pacific region, a project known as the Pivot to Asia. Over in California, a new tax system is under discussion. Companies will be taxed according to how much they underpaid their workers. The proposed tax will be based on the ratio between the company boss and its lowest paid workers. The bigger the gap, the more the tax paid. Will the proposal become law? Don't hold your breath. But once again, it does underline the optimistic view. Current problems are solvable, but it is the current political corporate elite which is the problem. Feeling friendless on Facebook or Twitter? Well, you can buy new friends and followers. Take-Two just received an email offering just that. They guarantee to deliver 1,000 likes or followers within 24 hours. Apparently there are sweatshops in the Far East full of people who sit clicking all day. So if you're wondering why social media do not work for your campaign, perhaps the system is even more loaded than you realised. Diego Garcia, one of the Chagos Islands in the Indian Ocean, is owned by the British government but loaned until 2016 to the US military and is in effect a huge floating US military base with thousands of US and UK military personnel stationed there. It's in a strategic position for monitoring East Africa, India, Australia and Southeast Asian countries. Diego Garcia was used in the war on Afghanistan and Iraq, and it's alleged it was used for the CIA's extraordinary rendition. Recently, the US Senate Intelligence Committee announced plans to declassify 500 pages of an investigation that shows the CIA held, quote, high-value suspects in what it termed a black site or secret CIA prison on Diego Garcia with full acquiescence of UK governments. Our correspondent Fran Anderson looked into this.
Well, back in 1966 there was an Anglo-American agreement relating to Diego Garcia that the UK still has, in quotes, exclusive jurisdiction over members of the United States forces with respect to offences, including offences relating to security, punishable by law in force in the territory, but not by the law of the United States. So in other words, if the US military has breached international human rights legislation, then so has the UK, and more so as the UK are still in overall charge of Diego Garcia. According to WikiLeaks, the US stored cluster bombs there to avoid UK parliamentary scrutiny.
We've also had allegations of that they're using it as a black interrogation centre, illegal detentions. Is there any substance to that?
Well, yes, Ian. Looking at the extraordinary renditions, first of all, several independent sources suggest that logs of flights through Diego Garcia were destroyed. Journalist Stephen Gray's book, Ghost Plane, published in 2006, exposes the CIA rendition flights on the island. In 2011, a flight plan found in Tripoli backs up claims made by Abdul Hakim Belhaj, a rebel commander and opponent of Colonel Gaddafi. He says he and his pregnant wife were arrested in a US-UK extraordinary rendition operation, and their flight to Libya stopped off and fueled at Diego Garcia. Belhad's tried to take Jack Straw, ex-UK Foreign Secretary, and Sir Mark Allen, ex-MI6, to court, but his case failed. And leaks from WikiLeaks show that despite repeated denials by the UK governments, Diego Garcia was definitely used for extraordinary renditions. And since 2001, the US have used ships as floating prisons moored at Diego Garcia. United Nations investigator Manfred Novak said there's evidence supporting these allegations. And in 2007, whistleblower retired US Army General Barry McCaffrey revealed the CIA has an interrogation centre called Camp Justice at Diego Garcia. And a Council of Europe report also named Diego Garcia as a secret prison, so there's ample evidence, and it's suspected that prisoners were held and possibly tortured there.
Why haven't we been hearing about this from the media?
Well, Ian, hardly anyone is allowed to go on to Diego Garcia. It's more secretive than Guantanamo Bay. Here are some other little known facts. In returning for loaning it to the US cancelled a debt of $14 million owed by the UK. At the time, the US claimed there were no residents, but in fact, descendants of Africans lived there since the 1770s. In 1965, just 2 years before Mauritian independence, the British separated the Chagos Islands from Mauritius, which was in breach of a 1960 UN resolution banning the breakup of colonies prior to independence. And by 1973, the US military forcibly resettled all Diego Garcia residents in Mauritius or the Seychelles, leaving them with no money and no housing, and their pet dogs were rounded up and killed by gassing, according to David Vine, author of Island of Shame, The Secret History of the US Military Base on Diego Garcia, published in 2009. The Chagosans have been fighting a long legal battle for a right to return to their homeland and for compensation from the UK. In 2010, the UK government made the Chagos Islands a marine preservation area, and WikiLeaks documents show that in 2009, the UK Foreign Office planned to make it impossible for residents described as Man Fridays from returning by making the Chagos Islands a marine reserve. This decision is being challenged in the European courts by Mauritius. Lawyers representing Mauritius include Elizabeth Wilmshurst, a Foreign Office lawyer who resigned in protest of the Iraq War.
So the Diego Garcia issues raises several issues, doesn't it? Human rights issues, extraordinary rendition, secret CIA prisons, forcible and unjust treatment of ex-residents. Is there anything more?
Well, Ian, yes, there is more. Kenya's ex-Mau Mau members are litigating for the right to sue the British over torture they endured during Kenya's struggle for independence. Historians working for the ex-Mau Mau lawyers discovered a hidden archive of colonial-era files. These files contain information about the Chagos Islands and 37 other British colonies or protectorates. The UK government is in breach of laws relating to handling of official documents. For instance, surviving instruction documents show that colonial officials were told to destroy files containing evidence of official misdeeds committed before independence and to leave no trace of them or their destruction. Many of these files are still classified. Journalist Ian Cobain says it's possible that more than 1 million of foreign and Commonwealth files are held in the HMG Communications Centre at Hanslope Park near Milton Keynes. Demands for full disclosure are mounting. Fellows of the British Academy wrote to Foreign Secretary William Hague complaining of his refusal to release the files.
Some people would say this is just old history, you know, but what would you say to that?
The study of Britain's and other European countries' colonial past are of public interest. The past shapes our world today. History needs to be rewritten as new evidence is uncovered. It's important to know the truth, whether it's the past or the present. The official view of the British Empire is that it benefited the colonised by bringing trade, development and the rule of law, and that independence was given peacefully. This narrative has been demolished due to facts showing the opposite. The British Empire, like any other empire, was brutal. It used concentration camps, ethnic cleansing, torture and massacres.
So going back to the present, what is currently the UK government's position on these allegations of illegal renditions and secret prisons on Diego Garcia?
Well, Ian, since concerns were raised way back in 2002, successive UK governments have denied it until 2008, when David Miliband, former Foreign Secretary, admitted to 2 extraordinary rendition flights refuelling at Diego Garcia, and a parliamentary committee was set up, but no legal action was proposed, despite the UK and US clearly breaking international laws. Amrit Singh, US senior lawyer and author of Administration of Torture, said that WikiLeaks shows that UK involvement with the CIA went far beyond tacit complicity. And Corrie Ryder from Reprieve said, "We need to know immediately whether ministers misled Parliament over CIA torture on British soil." And incidentally, Ian, the website Global Research asks, why was the Malaysian MH370 flight not detected by the Diego Garcia US Naval and Intelligence Base in the Indian Ocean?
We are looking into this actually, and we're hoping to have a report in a future show. The abduction of 230 schoolgirls from the Nigerian town of Chibok sent the Western media into a frenzy of soul-searching and emotion-tugging that no kind-hearted, liberal-minded Westerner can possibly ignore. Failure to send John Wayne in to effect a rescue would make us all just as guilty as the monstrous Boko Haram Islamist terrorists who perpetrated this most heinous of crimes. Surely no one can cast aspersions on the West's altruistic motives in this case. Can they, Roy?
Well, yes, you can, Ian, really. I mean, for me, if it walks like a duck and it sounds like a duck but it smells like a fish, then it's a fish.
A duck, a fish.
yeah. But I mean, these don't get me wrong. These Nigerian schoolgirls are victims, you know. But it feels to me like they're in the middle of a staged production, and so they have been taken, but the motivation behind it, I think, is questionable. Boko Haram basically kind of means Western education is forbidden, and this group want to impose Sharia law across West Africa. But their leader, Abu Bakr Shekau, said, "I swear to Almighty Allah, you will not see them again until you release our people that you have captured."
I recall the Joseph Kony story from Uganda, where some horror, was paraded in front of us.
Joseph Kony had sex slaves and child soldiers, and there was a big internet campaign which allowed US forces to go in to hunt for Joseph Kony, and it was that social media campaign, wasn't it? Just like Michelle Obama now has that hashtag "Bring Back Our Girls" for the Nigerian girls. But with the Joseph Kony thing, which was 2.5 years ago now, it was agreed on the 24th of March of this year, 2014, that the US is sending in 150 more troops and 4 brand new aircraft, still looking for Joseph Kony 2.5 years later. So
it's a bit like that character in George Orwell, isn't it? The ubiquitous enemy who never gets quite found.
That's right. Well,
Osama bin Laden. Actually.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what the war on terror is. Isn't it? It's a war that you can never possibly end because it's always going to be there. Yeah. To me, it just feels blatant. Really, they're not even trying to hide it. Really, and a lot of people in the know feel this as well. Naomi Wolf, who's a very good author and journalist, she's done a lot of research on this, and she's just saying this is systemic across that part of Africa. There's girls and women and everybody being kidnapped and sold into slavery all the time.
Really, almost like a sort of not very exceptionable local crime that's been elevated to a world issue, when there are so many other things that could be dealt with as much more important issues. mass starvation, you know, the civil war in Syria, where some other friends of ours are busy
but
blowing
you know,
everything up.
we've already gone over there. We've already been to Libya. We've already got their oil, and now we need Nigeria's oil, because Nigeria is now the biggest GDP in Africa.
Right.
Overtook South Africa a couple of years ago. 174 million population.
So Nigeria is a very valuable prize in the new rush for Africa.
This is all about denying China as well as getting it for ourselves.
Oh yeah.
But Nigeria, so 8th in the world in oil exports, which quite surprised me. 4th in the world in liquefied natural gas.
Yes, which is quite transportable.
Yeah, yeah. The US get 5% of their oil from there, and in the last few years there's been 20 more billionaires created in Nigeria, and yet 60% of the population live on less than $1 a day.
And meanwhile the Americans are gradually increasing their, after the fall of Gaddafi, they're now they've taken over Djibouti. They found some little place that doesn't mind having them in exchange for loads of money.
Djibouti, which is about the size of the Isle of Wight, really.
Right, it's a bit like
I don't mean that seriously, but
another Diego Garcia, another sort of floating aircraft carrier.
Yeah, and so they've had a base there for a little while. They're spending 750 million upgrading that now. But as I say, this is a lot of this is to deny China. And we got the commander of AFRICOM, which is the US presence in Africa, General David Rodriguez, and he's explained to the House Armed Services Committee, so it's an official committee, that the US intervention was largely about oil and other mineral resources. The African continent's energy and strategic mineral reserves are also of growing significance to China, India and other countries in the broader Indian Ocean basin. Africa's increasing importance to allies and emerging powers, including China, India and Brazil, provides opportunities to reinforce US security objectives in other regions through our engagement on the continent.
Well, that's pretty much another way of saying we're going to blackmail our enemies by grabbing their fuel supplies, isn't it?
Well, yeah. Does that shock you?
It's surprising they should be so flagrant. Do they think
we
can't understand English?
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? 90% of the Western population
don't understand.
They
won't even know he said that.
They won't even get to hear this. And they are becoming, they're just so arrogant and so blatant. And of course, that's what will bring them down in the end with a bit of luck. John Kerry, who's the Secretary of State, he was talking with, he was saying, we've been in touch with Abuja since day one. It rebuffed US offers of help. This is in the schoolgirl scenario. It rebuffed US offers of help until Tuesday, when Kerry spoke with Nigeria's President Goodluck Jonathan. I think now the complications that have arisen have convinced everybody there needs to be a greater effort, and it will begin immediately. I mean, literally immediately. So Nigeria has obviously been going, no, we don't want you. We'll sort this out ourselves. And the Yanks have obviously gone in there, and I think it's that. The complications is really that Western media, the Western media.
They've used the media to pressure the Nigerian government, because the media is, in a sense, the secret weapon of the NATO powers, isn't it?
But the Yanks aren't putting in troops quite just yet over this. They're putting in technical experts.
Oh yeah.
So they'll be there to help those poor girls out.
They'll be presumably feeling their way into the Nigerian power structures, identifying, where they want their actual next wave of people to be sent to, presumably identifying bribable officials.
Yeah. But as I say, that elite is basically set up by us and maintained by us. When I say us, I mean the West. But we've also got to realise that because Boko Haram were fighting for us in Libya, they've got quite sophisticated weaponry. Really, they've got anti-tank weapons and stuff like that. So this is all set to grow. So Boko Haram's going to be Nigeria's Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein, or Al Qaeda. So they're being set up to be because we don't want to go in there and save those girls and then leave, do we? We want to get our feet under the table.
It does seem extraordinary. It does seem that the only real policy that would do one thing, the lowest common denominator of NATO activities for the last 15 years has been just throwing petrol on fires, starting fires and throwing petrol on them. Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Ukraine, Nigeria, Mali.
This is our modus operandi, isn't it? And we set all this up at the end of the Second World War when we withdrew from our colonies. And it's the same with Nigeria. We set everything up so you've got Christians and Muslims in the same country, so that they are able to be divided and ruled. This is
the borders, the colonial time era borders. Yeah. Well, that brings to an end this episode of Take Two. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks to the People's Voice for bringing us to you. Thanks to Coffee Plant for sponsoring this show. And just to let you know that you can catch up with all our previous archive of shows, lots of research there, lots of information about current affairs, by going to RADTV UK YouTube channel.